Um, Rachel, are wonderful. Thank you. Um, and we are going to kick it off because we have quite a few folks. My first speaker that I would love to introduce is Marjorie Rossi with the Presbyterian Peace Fellowship. She will be talking about overture related to gun violence. Marjorie, you have the floor.
Thanks, Annika. So good morning, all. As Annika said, my name is Marjorie Rossi, and it is my honor and privilege to serve as both the pastor of the South Presbyterian Church in Dobbs Ferry, New York, and as the acting coordinator of gun violence prevention ministry with the Presbyterian Peace Fellowship. The reason that this overture, DOE03, is necessary is really right in the title. An overture calling for action, that children may live free from gun violence. Creating a world where children are not killed or injured or traumatized by gun violence should simply not be controversial. And yet, gun violence is the #1 killer of children and youth in our nation, a fact I find thoroughly appalling. Many more are injured and traumatized daily as our nation accepts the gun industry's lies that children's death and injury and trauma are necessary consequences for adults to have the right to bear arms. This overture calls on Presbyterians across the nation to move beyond thoughts and prayers, to take action on behalf of children, to demonstrate to them that we do not accept these lies, and to provide a witness that we hold children's lives as more sacred than profits for the gun industry. This can be done in a multitude of ways, many of which are included in the overture and in the accompanying resource list. I'd like to draw your attention to a few of these actions and resources. In America, 4.6 million children live in homes with guns that are both loaded and unlocked, and this number is growing. Secure gun storage saves lives. Addressing this fact alone would save many lives and shift our nation's thinking about where the true danger lies when we are talking about firearms at home. The most common reason people give for purchasing firearms is to protect their home and family, responding to the constant advertising claims that dangerous people out there might burst through the door at any moment, and therefore they must be ready in an instant to confront such fearsome, unpredictable danger. The real danger, however, is leaving a loaded, unsecured firearm in a home where children can access it and use it in moments of despair or anger to take their own lives or someone else's, or simply succumb to the normal curiosity of childhood to investigate an object that should never be available to them. This overture provides a variety of actions that Presbyterians can take and resources to support each action to help gun-owning families and households keep children safe. For example, distribute gun locks and safety cards. Here's an example of a gun lock. Gun locks and safety cards to teach adults how to secure their firearms. This can be done in collaboration with other congregations within the congregation itself, at street fairs or festivals, or even with community organizations or schools. It would be an excellent outreach project for congregations who wish to connect with local families. Or offering training for parents and guardians to ask whether there are firearms in any home where they bring their children for play dates or care. Asking such questions can be awkward and confrontational, and it requires some courage. Declining to bring children to a home with unsecured firearms requires even more courage, but as followers of Jesus Christ, we are called to have a spirit of courage. Offering such training is a great way for congregations to connect with parents and guardians and to help build a culture of courage and faith in their communities. This year, all overtures for General Assembly had to meet a 1,500 word limit. So there are a lot of resources and statistics and source material that can be accessed via a link that is embedded in the overture, and I will put that link in the chat when I'm finished speaking. I encourage you to click the link and visit that page. On it, you will find a report from the organization Everytown for Gun Safety, which talks about what really makes for safe schools. It is not more police, more metal detectors, or armed teachers. Instead, what really makes for safe schools are all the programs and professionals that are often first to get cut in times of tight budgets. Social workers, for example, and compassionate care for children and families in crisis. This report may provide congregations with advocacy opportunities, with legislators at all levels of government, as well as with their local school districts. My last example is a way to provide a witness to children and families about our calling to make peace and bring healing. When telling his traumatized community about what God's vision of peace and wholeness for them looked like, the prophet Isaiah included these infamous words: "They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks." Today, our nation uses firearms to commit violence much more than swords or spears. And so the Presbyterian Peace Fellowship offers action circles, opportunities for congregations across the country to learn how to join the Guns to Gardens movement, where gun owners may bring unwanted firearms to be chopped up into pieces. And then if they wish, they may donate these pieces to be made into garden tools like this one by blacksmiths, which can then be used, as Isaiah envisioned, to grow food and bring healing and peace where violence and trauma previously lived. Today, our nation uses swords and spears to commit violence. And so in order to bring this vision to life, that paragraph is a repeat, and I apologize for that. It was my own mistake there. But I will say that there are many, many ways that Presbyterians can take action to keep children free from gun violence. I urge you not only to read through this overture thoroughly, but also to listen for the ways that it stirs you to action. And commissioners, I pray that you will be moved to pass this overture so that, as a church, we can declare that the lives of children are more sacred than guns. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you, Marjorie. And the link has been shared to that further justification in the chat for DOE 03 if you would like to check it out. Our next speaker, also from the Presbyterian Peace Fellowship, is Jan Orr Harder, talking about our Special Offerings Task Report and DOE 01. Jan, you have the floor.
Sorry. Does everybody have their view set on speaker? It might be easier if we all had our view set on speaker. Okay, thank you, Annika. I am going to talk about an item for the Financial Resources Committee. It's Finance 12, the Special Offerings Task Force. This is not an item that PPF would typically comment on, but we do have concerns about this Finance 12 item related to peacemaking. The Peace Fellowship appreciates the work of the Special Offerings Task Force, but we believe that a portion of this report needs to be amended by the Financial Resources Committee or by the GA plenary. Reports come to General Assembly with lots of bureaucratic momentum. They are rolling. There are no Presbytery advocates to comment on it because it's not an overture. So the only way to impact problems in a report is to educate commissioners and advisory delegates on the unintended harmful implications that are in a report or through the public hearing testimonies. So please consider studying this and testifying on Finance 12 in the public hearing. In general, the Special Offerings Report reduces the offerings from 4 to 3 per year. It merges the current Peace and Global Witness Special Offering into a new World Communion offering, and this is the part of the report that concerns us. It redesigns the concept of special offerings from funding special causes and special programs to a source of general mission funding for the denomination. The goal is to move special offering impacts in the general direction of the Matthew 25 initiative without tying the proceeds to specific programs and percentages, though in the report this is applied inconsistently. And finally, one of the big changes is that congregations and others would then be able to apply for grants to support special projects. So the allocation of money is moving inward, not outward. Our specific concerns about merging the Peace and Global Witness offering into World Communion offering are two things. First, congregations will no longer keep the 25% of their special offering funds for their own local peacemaking projects. The Mid-Council, Synod, Presbytery would lose their 25% share too. This local percentage of the offering has been one of the main reasons that churches participate in the Peace and Global Witness offering to begin with. These funds have empowered lots of good things locally for peacemaking. A compromise amendment for the committee to consider might be to retain the 25% for congregations for local empowerment and let the mid-council portion be retained by the denomination for general mission or grants. Here's our other concern. So currently, the Peace and Global Witness offering has 25% that goes to the local church that gave the money, 25% that is shared by presbyteries and synods, and 50% that funds the National Peacemaking Program, the Presbyterian Peacemaking Program. The World Communion offering that is proposed in the report merges many other worthwhile causes into this new offering, and this, to us, endangers the funding of the Presbyterian Peacemaking Program. I just want to clarify that this is not about our group. The Presbyterian Peace Fellowship, PPF, is an independent, somewhat scrappy nonprofit organization of local Presbyterians. We raise our own funds. What's at stake here is funding for the Presbyterian Peacemaking Program, PPP, the official program of the Presbyterian Church that is currently funded by this special offering. Since 1980, the Presbyterian Peacemaking Program has organized thousands of Presbyterians to experience and act on the intersection of the gospel with the reality of violence, war, and peace. They provide programs, things like the International Peacemakers Tour, which may have come to your presbytery. They offer many travel study events, like the Mosaic of Peace event in the Middle East, or even last week, they did a travel study tour of the civil rights history in the American South. While we support, they also coordinate the Presbyterian Decade to end gun violence. So they have a big portfolio. While we support all the other good causes that the World Communion offering would fund, this is not the time in our world to reduce commitment to peacemaking. So those are the two concerns, 25% for the congregations and the funding of the peacemaking program. I just want to say that it's really hard for a GA committee to alter a task force report, but it's not impossible. You never know. There could be others who disagree with other parts of the report or feel that it's not quite ready for action or that it disempowers local Presbyterians. So anyone who raises questions about the part that we're concerned about might be part of a larger effort to raise questions, vote down, or amend this report. Finally, I just want to say that the Peace Fellowship agrees with the official comments on the Special Offerings Task Force from the Advisory Committee on Social Witness Policy. Am I over my time? No. You can find this if you go to Finance 12, you go all the way down to the bottom, you see all the official comments. The Advisory Committee on Social Witness Policy, which goes by AC-SWAP, they call for an amendment to the report. They raise many wise questions, such as, listen to what AC-SWAP asks. Does removing World Communion offering funds from grassroots initiatives and holding them in a grant-making process serve the Matthew 25 movement most fully? Might accumulation and consolidation in national offices, coupled with added procedural steps of applying for grants, stymie community-based initiatives? And finally, does this move continue to privilege those who have the resources to follow a grant process through? These are excellent questions. With all due respect to the Special Offerings Task Force, Finance 12 needs to be amended to allow congregations to retain 25% of the special offering to use for their own projects and to prioritize the funding of the Presbyterian Peacemaking Program. I'm going to speak also on an item before the Domestic Engagement Committee, DOE02, supporting an amendment to the U.S. Constitution to abolish the clause in the 13th Amendment that permits those who are convicted of a crime to be enslaved. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery in 1865, except for a clause that allowed those who are convicted of a crime to be enslaved through forced labor. This is a human rights issue. The overture calls for the denomination to support two bills in Congress to amend the U.S. Constitution by ending forced prison labor, but allowing voluntary paid labor. We hope the committee will support DOE02 and that folks will sign up to testify for it in the public hearing. You can learn more about it in the Peace Fellowship briefing paper for the Domestic Engagement Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Switching to another peacemaking partner with the Covenant Network of Presbyterians, I would love to give the floor to Brian Ellison.
Thanks, Annika, and thanks to the Presbyterian Peace Fellowship for these decades of partnership that we've had in bringing about a lot of progress and a lot of change in the church. I'm speaking to item POL-01, which is informally known as the Olympia Overture, although in fact it's been supported by 10 presbyteries and 9 presbyteries and 1 synod who have all concurred with this item. This is an item that we think is a necessary, albeit measured and moderate step toward the next season in our life as a church of moving toward a deeper and more authentic inclusion of all people, and in particular, our LGBTQIA plus siblings in Christ. The overture, and you see the link there, has 2 parts. The first part is an amendment to the paragraph in the Book of Order that is sort of the foundational bedrock paragraph that names our principles of representation. It is the list of groups against which we do not discriminate in the church, and we're committed to their full inclusion and participation in our life. It's been a really important paragraph. A lot of the work of the church is rooted in this paragraph and our commitment to our unity and diversity. This amendment would add 2 key phrases to that list: sexual orientation and gender identity, which, although we have taken many positions as a church affirming our commitment to equity and inclusion of people of diverse gender identities and sexual orientations, we've not yet enshrined that in our Book of Order, and it feels like time. It feels like an accurate statement of our values to say this is who we are as a church. And just as we don't discriminate on the basis of race or sex or ethnicity or these other categories, we also don't discriminate on those bases. The second part of the overture, if the first part is about stating our values with clarity, the second part is about putting those values into action. And what the second part does is it takes us to that paragraph in the Book of Order, G20104B, the one that deals with examinations of candidates for ordination or installation. And it adds these words. It says to fulfill all requirements as expressed in the Constitution and in the principles of participation, representation, and non-discrimination found in F10403. What this does effectively is it asks, it sets the expectation that every ordination or installation exam needs to talk about the candidate's commitment to the principles of participation and representation in our life as a church. Not, by the way, just about LGBTQ issues, but more broadly, our overall commitment to being a diverse and inclusive church. It does not, and this is really important to say because there's been a lot of controversy and confusion around this with folks who are trying to make the overture seem more scary or more sweeping than it is. What this overture does not do is require a presbytery or session to exclude someone because of what their answer to this question might be. It does not say what the only acceptable answer to this question is, but it says it needs to be part of the conversation. In fact, it doesn't even say what the question is. It just says that the examination needs to include an exploration of the candidate's commitment to the principles of participation, representation, and non-discrimination. Now, I mentioned it was supported by 9 presbyteries and 1 synod. I will tell you the Covenant Network of Presbyterians very strongly supports this overture. And in fact, I will put a link in the chat to the Board of Directors statement in support of this overture, which gives you a fairly good summary of why we think it's important. The reality is that we didn't expect there to be quite the response there's been from certain quarters of the church. The fellowship community has come out very strongly against, as has a small but vocal group of pastors who are identifying themselves as theologically diverse, or even in some cases calling themselves moderate, who are particularly expressing opposition to the second part of the overture. A lot of those arguments against are using what I would characterize as an inaccurate description of both the intent and the impact of the overture. And so one of the things we're really encouraging commissioners and advisory delegates to do is to read the language closely, to read what it says, to pay attention to the recommendation itself, not even to the rationale from our various presbyteries, but to what it actually says, because I think it's being misrepresented pretty widely. It has had support from all of the advocacy committees of the General Assembly, including the newly created Advocacy Committee for LGBTQIA+ Equity. It also has had support from the Committee on Representation. And of course, that's significant because General Assembly COR really takes its mandate and all of its work from that paragraph F10403 that is being amended, and they support this change. The Advisory Committee on the Constitution has come out in support of Part 1 and has said that they think there are things commissioners should consider about Part 2. The thrust of their concern about Part 2 is that they think it's redundant. They think it is already something that could happen as a result of what's already in the Book of Order. We disagree with that. We think that clarity is sometimes more important than being afraid of redundancy. We think it's important to name this commitment and name our responsibility to do this kind of examination. Certainly the ACC's advice makes clear that whatever threatened harms you're hearing about from some of the opponents of this overture aren't going to happen, because according to the ACC's advice, they would already have happened if they were going to, if this is so redundant. I'm happy when we get to that point to answer questions, but we believe this is an essential moment for the church. As much progress as we've made, the reality is that we have not yet achieved equity for LGBTQIA+ people. Queer folks who are seeking to serve in the church are not always sure of where they stand, even with their colleagues, even in their presbyteries, whether it is safe for them to be in particular spaces, to apply for certain jobs, whether people who are coming into their presbytery are going to affirm them to the ministry to which they're called. These are fair questions to ask. They're important questions for us as we continue to identify who we truly are going to be as the PCUSA. And we hope everyone will support this overture. Happy to take questions when we get to that point later. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Brian. Next up, I would love to invite Pauline Kaufman, speaking on behalf of the Israel-Palestine Mission Network. Pauline, you have the floor.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me all right?
Sure can.
Great, thanks. I'm pleased to be able to talk to you today about 2 overtures coming before General Assembly. INT 05 on confessing our complicity in Christian Zionism, and the next one, INT 06, educational resources for seeking ways to end Israeli apartheid. They're both in the International Committee, obviously. Both overtures are educational in nature. at their core. One calls for study materials to be made available that would address the ways that Christian Zionism has become mainstream across the country and in our churches. The other reminds us that educational resources are already available. I'm sorry Nahida Halaby Gordon is not taking you through the first one, as her presbytery was the first to pass the overture. Unfortunately, she's awaiting heart surgery right now and is unable to be with us. We send our good wishes for healing to you, Nahida. First, the overture on Christian Zionism. There are several points to make. The 226th General Assembly back 20 years ago, 2004, passed an overture confronting Christian Zionism. It has already been done, but few were aware of Christian Zionism 20 years ago, and it passed without opposition. Since then, Christian Zionism has spread across our country, becoming a dominant theology in the United States, in the evangelical community, and in the mainline church, in Asia, South Africa, and South America. 3 ways have expanded that has expanded are listed in the overture. First, Christianity implicitly and sometimes explicitly links the state of Israel to biblical views of the scripture's promised land. The global spread of Christian Zionism understands the state of Israel as the biblical kingdom of God. That's the second one. And the third one, the growing understanding of settler colonialism with reference to the doctrine of discovery, rather than a paradigm of conflict and occupation, show how mainline Christians and those of other faiths are complicit in the erasure of Palestinians, although most Christians are unaware of the connections with Zionism. The overture calls upon the Office of World Mission to work with our partners across the world who are also confronting mainline Christian Zionism in their contexts, holding events to discuss and learn from one another. The overture reminds us that from the 204 policies that Christian Zionism is a form of errant theology that has been used for specific political goals to support the modern nation state's conquest and dispossession of Palestinians at any cost in order to return the Jews to the land of Israel and bring about the final battle of Armageddon so that our Messiah can return. Those of you who live in Texas are very much aware of Jem Hagee, head of the Christians United for Israel, that constantly promotes this viewpoint. Many are not aware of the mistaken theology, but support the Jewish state because of the Holocaust during World War II and their strong desire for Jews to have a safe home. I understand that. Colonialism was beginning to give up the reins at the conclusion of World War II as people around the world gained independence from colonial powers. But the creation of the State of Israel went against that tide as it deprived the indigenous people of their rights and ancestral lands. There are now 5 presbyteries who have voted to support this overture. Unfortunately, my own, Chicago, failed to support the overture, and Nahida asked me to speak on her behalf today. But the 5 who did are Muskingum Valley, Nahida's Presbyterian, Ohio, Southern New England, San Francisco, Boston, and Utah. I recommend that you focus on the educational nature of the overture rather than trying to explain settler colonialism and the doctrine of discovery. That gets us deep into the weeds, and the whole point is to work on the educational nature. It's also supported by several denominational groups, the Advocacy on Women and Gender Justice, the Racial Ethnic Equity Committee, and the Advisory Committee on Social Witness Policy. Since October 7th and the Hamas attack on a Jewish town near the Gaza border, more people have become aware of the suffering of Palestinians that led to the attack. This is because in the past, Israel has responded with disproportionate violence. There is now momentum for listening and opening hearts and minds. But I still think this overture is going to be controversial, and we would very much appreciate your support. The second overture I have asked to speak to is the INT 06, Educational Resources for Seeking Ways to End Israeli Apartheid. This overture informs our denomination at all levels, members, congregations, presbyteries, and national staff, that there are already resources available to equip our church with understanding Israeli apartheid in the broader framework of the post-colonial world today. Two resources in particular are very helpful. One is the booklet, Why Palestine Matters, The Struggle to End Colonialism, which is both a book that you can order from the website and it is available in digital form on the IPMN website, theipmn.org, under resources. The second one is called Focus Palestine. That's only available digitally, and it was created by members of IPMN for the World Communion of Reformed Churches, WCRC, a large global umbrella group. Both resources are comprehensive and cover history, narratives, intersectionality with other human rights struggles, the problem of Christian Zionism, economic actions like boycott, divestment, and sanctions, how colonialism has played into the region, and the resulting plight of refugees after the creation of the State of Israel. It also speaks to the erasure of local culture and narrative as told by both Israelis and Palestinians. Both digital booklets are free downloads and have helpful short video episodes. This educational overture was brought by San Francisco Presbytery, is supported by Boston, Utah, and Redwood. It's also supported by these permanent GA committees, Racial Equity Advocacy Committee, and the Advisory Committee on Social Witness Policy. I would be glad to address questions as we get to them at the end of this presentations. Thank you for allowing me to do this. I'm done.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Pauline. And we have one more representative from Israel-Palestine Mission Network speaking on an overture within the Finance Committee. I would love to welcome Bob Ross.
Thanks, Annika, and thanks everybody for being here this morning. It's great to see a lot of familiar faces and new faces. I'm going to speak about FIN01 on engagement with General Electric and Palantir Technologies for possible divestment recommendations. This overture, if passed, would have the Committee on Mission Responsibility through Investment, often known as MRTI, to begin the focused engagement process with these two companies, General Electric and Palantir Technologies. And then if you're not familiar with this, the engagement process means that officials from MRTI, from Presbyterian Church, would meet with representatives of these companies and tell them that we are not happy with how they're conducting business, the human harm that is created by their business, and as investors in those companies, we want them to change their business practices. If they don't, after 2 years, if they don't look like they're budging, the Committee Mission Responsibility through Investment would come back to the 227th General Assembly in 2026 and potentially recommend that we divest from those two companies. This is an overture that was brought by Pittsburgh Presbytery, and it was received concurrences from 7 other presbyteries, and it's recommended for approval by the Advisory Committee on Social Witness Policy. So why are we targeting these two companies? Both companies are involved in military-related production and human rights violations for several years now and continuing through this very day, literally today. And the Presbyterian Church, as many of you know, has long engaged with and divested from companies that profit from military-related production and human rights violations. There is a longer list than I have time today to read of all of the companies that the church has divested from for various reasons over several decades. But I want to alert you to the 1968 General Assembly, which laid the groundwork for this sort of stewardship of our financial resources. And I quote from an overture from this General Assembly: "The Church of today must accept the fact that it has great power in its hands, especially economic power. Through its individual members who hold responsible positions in business, government, and organized labor, the Church has additional power in its vast holdings in real property and investments, and in its accumulation of large sums of money. Therefore, in its corporate use of power, it must set an example, and in its counsel to its membership, it must be ethically competent. The Church is also faced with a decision concerning how it should spend and invest sums of money under the control of its courts, boards, agencies, and institutions. The power to spend and to invest includes the power to refrain from spending or investing." So we have the policy, the polity, and the tools to engage with these companies and potentially divest. I want to say a little bit about each of these companies. General Electric has been involved in military-related production, human rights abuses, and human harm in Palestine, Israel, in Yemen, and in China. In Palestine, Israel, General Electric makes the engines of all F-15 and F-16 fighter jets and the electronic components of F-35 fighter jets that the Israeli military has been using for several years now, including to this day in Gaza. Each of these jets has regularly bombed Gaza during the current genocidal war, and they were used in the 2008-2009 war, the 2014 war, and the 2021 wars. General Electric also makes the engines that are used by Israel's Apache helicopters, which have been used to attack and kill Palestinians in the occupied West Bank and Gaza. In Yemen, General Electric makes the engines for the Royal Saudi Air Force, including its F-15 jets and Black Hawk and Apache helicopters. And these weapons have been used to bomb Yemen over the past several years. The human rights organization PAX has accused General Electric of contributing to the human rights violations in Yemen. In China, General Electric supplies the Chinese company Dongguan Yidong Electronic Company Limited, which has been accused by human rights organizations of participating in the forced transfer, re-education, and exploitation of the Uyghur population. On to Palantir Technologies, a company I have to admit I'd never heard of before until about 7 months ago. It is one of the wealthiest and most powerful companies in the world. In Israel-Palestine, the Israeli military has used Palantir's artificial intelligence technology to identify Palestinian individuals considered, quote, a threat. Using this technology, Israel jails Palestinians because they fit the, quote, terrorist profile. One Israeli officer commented in 2016, "Unlike terrorists who belong to Hamas or the Islamic Jihad, if you get to their house a week before the attack, the kid doesn't know that he is a terrorist yet." And this is, they get to the kid's house by using this artificial intelligence to try to find people who fit the terrorist profile. By its police profiling, Palantir Technologies contributes to the mass incarceration of Palestinians. In the United States, Palantir Technology has been used by ICE on workplace raids and to separate migrant families. Amnesty International has accused the company of contributing to human rights abuses of migrants and asylum seekers on the US-Mexico border. Palantir Technology is also used by several US police forces in predictive policing, similarly to the way the Israeli military uses it to find the profile of someone who might commit a crime. And this practice in the United States, as well as elsewhere, is widely considered as racist. So we urge you, if you are a commissioner or an advisory delegate, to pass this overture. And I want to say one more word about a resolution that is not yet officially on the docket, but will likely be in the same committee. There's a commissioner's resolution that a commissioner is working on that will call on the church to divest from governmental debt of countries that are engaged in prolonged occupations. And this is modeled after a very similar resolution that the United Methodist Church passed just last month. And this would have the church sell off its bonds, Israeli bonds, Moroccan bonds, and Turkish bonds, because each of those three companies has been identified by the United Nations as engaging in prolonged occupations. If you want more information about that, feel free to contact me, or we can talk about it afterwards. I also will say that, unfortunately, I need to leave at 12 o'clock, so I may or may not be here for the Q&A. But thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bob Ross. Our next peacemaking group is Presbyterians for Earth Care. We have Bruce Gillette and Mark Eakin speaking to some of the overtures in the Environmental Committee. Bruce, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. It's great to see so many friends. I have been involved in the Peace Fellowship since 1978. So great to see so many people doing such wonderful work, as well as the companion friends in a variety of the groups we've already heard from. The Presbyterians for Earth Care has been doing a variety of things over the last couple of years since the last General Assembly. We continue to advocate on divestment, and that's EVO2, the removal of investments in and subsidies for fossil fuels. You may remember 2 years ago, the General Assembly for the first time recommended divesting by the Foundation and Board of Pensions for 5 major oil companies. Unfortunately, while that was accomplished, we still have hundreds of millions of dollars in those 2 agencies invested in fossil fuel companies. And one of the 5 merged with another company, and there's some question about its status continuing to be on the divestment list. So there's a lot of work still to be done in the area of divestment. What this overture does is call for it to be done across the board and to make a faith statement that this industry should no longer be considered one that we should consider investments in, similar to what we do relating to tobacco, alcohol, military weapons, etc. in the past. Beyond that, this overture also does something that previous overtures over the last 10 years trying to get divestment through. It calls upon it to be done at every level of the church. And that means not only the General Assembly agencies, but the Synod, presbyteries, local congregations, individuals, educational institutions, everybody that the church is connected to. We prayerfully ask them to consider divesting from fossil fuels. The need for this is very much evident. I have an article that is going to be published by the Presbyterian Outlook, hopefully in the coming days, and that cites a major study done by NOAA, our excellent and scientific organizations, that says in this past year, we've experienced the hottest year on record, hottest ocean temperatures on record, endless stream of heat waves, droughts, floods, wildfires, and storms. And what we think is bad now, that's we're going to look back in the future and say, that's actually a good time compared to what's coming. It's going to be very hard to change things and to continue to profit from industries that make this more and more a very difficult world to live in. Simply is not what the church should be about. Early in June, the studies were released that say the carbon dioxide level is the highest it's ever been, even since the existence of humanity. And that level is contributing to all of these problems. And that level of high CO2 is from the use of fossil fuels. Beyond the storms and the disasters, a study was done by 2 Harvard professors and a couple of other people from universities in the United Kingdom that found burning fossil fuels is responsible for over 10 million deaths annually. 10 million people dying prematurely because of fossil fuel uses. So we strongly urge the church to divest. I'm going to put in the chat all of the information that we have for our overtures on the PEC website. We have videos, we have all kinds of articles. We just did a webinar this past Wednesday with representatives from the Church of Scotland, the World Reform, the World Communion of Reformed Churches, and the United Reformed Church in England, showing that a number of groups around the world are already at this level of divesting and see the problem in truly what it is, a crisis level. Beyond divestment, we also are looking at something related to the fossil fuel industry, and that's plastic pollution. At the end of that overture, you'll see the amazing statistic that the total weight of plastic that has been produced, which again, doesn't disintegrate in an easy way to help us, but is around for a long, long time. That plastic's weight is greater now than all the living creatures in this world. Truly a staggering. And now those little microplastics, we are learning incredible damage that they are making. After the overture was written, the National Academy of Sciences pointed out how many thousands of little microplastics are in a little bottle of water. And then just this in May, the New England Journal of Medicine released a study that found these microplastics are in fact leading to strokes and heart attacks. And so we need to get this out of common use for the sake not only of humanity, but a staggering impact that it has on God's creation. I'm very grateful that we have on the steering committee of PEC a world-renowned scientist who's also a Presbyterian elder who will be a ruling elder going to this General Assembly from National Capital, and that's Dr. Mark Aiken, a retired NOAA scientist who's contributed to past IPCC reports and continues to lecture around the world on how climate change specifically looks at coral reefs, but far beyond that. So Mark, if you could take it away and fill in all the gaps I left out.
Thanks, Bruce. There are a couple of other overtures that I'm going to speak to very briefly. The first of those is ENV01, which is the adoption of the Sustainable Peace Pledge. This one is not just environmental, but also addresses other areas and is very simple in saying that sustainable peace entails the physical, material, psychological, cultural, religious, and ecological well-being of all peoples. We declare our organizational intention to pursue sustainable peace in our work and our lives. This seems like something that would be just integral to what PPF is interested in, and is sort of a motherhood and apple pie sort of statement, but it really is something that we all should be supporting very, very strongly. I won't speak to ENV 02 or 03 that Bruce has already spoken to, but I will mention one other, and that's ENV 06, which is coming to us from the Mission Responsibility Through Investment program. ENV 06 is one we recommend that commissioners oppose or provide language to modify it. ENV 06 really is just saying that what should be done is that we continue to use the engagement process to deal with fossil fuel companies. And while that's a reasonable thing to do with users of fossil fuels and some of the companies that have been identified for engagement, like Duke and American Airlines and Ford Motor Company and General Motors, it doesn't make sense for ConocoPhillips or other oil companies that are being supported. Those we need to be divesting from at this time, and it's our opinion that MRTI, in putting forth ENV 06, which does not recommend divestment from any fossil fuel companies at this time, is really a delaying tactic that continues the delay that's been going on and has been moving us down this road for 10 years of delay since presbyteries first came to the General Assembly asking for divestment. So in the case of 06, our recommendation is either opposition or amendment so that it includes the divestment from fossil fuel companies rather than continued engagement. Thank you very much, and I'll be around at question time later on as well.
Thank you so much, Bruce and Mark. And last but certainly not least, speaking on behalf of More Light Presbyterians and providing a perspective on how to engage GA work through the lens of intersectionality, I would love to welcome Ms. Claudia Aguilar Rubalcaba. Claudia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Annika. And thank you all so much for being here today. My name is, as Annika said, my name is Claudia Aguilar Rubalcaba, and I serve as Director of Engagement at More Light Presbyterians. And I'm so grateful for the invitation to participate in this panel and everything I have learned so far. Like, seriously, y'all blow my mind. I would also love to extend my gratitude to Brian Ellison and the Covenant Network of Presbyterians on their work on the Olympia Overture. And Brian, please correct me if I mess it up. And after hearing all the overtures people are concerned about, there is very little I can say, so I'll try to keep it short. Logically, the Olympia Overture is very important to us as it clearly reflects our mission, which is to center and celebrate the lives, gifts, and leadership of LGBTQIA people in the Presbyterian Church USA and beyond. Part A of this overture expands the pool of protected classes in the spirit of James 2, verse 1, that asks us to not claim the faith of our Lord Jesus Christ of glory while showing partiality. The truth is that partiality is still evident in our denomination, and people in protected classes still have a really hard time getting interviews, being extended calls, and moving forward in the ordination process. Up until this moment, some churches and presbyteries have gotten away with pretending LGBTQIA plus people and other people in protected classes don't exist. Part B of this proposed amendment makes this not an option anymore. People's right to have an opinion will remain intact. What will change is that they can't avoid talking about it anymore, talking about us anymore. But the truth is that all of these overtures are relevant for More Light Presbyterians and the work we do. For the last few weeks, I have received emails from people telling us that More Light Presbyterians has nothing to do writing a statement on the war in Israel, Gaza. For a few years, More Light Presbyterians has been working on using an intersectional framework for our work. We acknowledge that issues, just like humans, are complex, multi-layered, and interconnected. And we seek, and I'm quoting our mission, to journey towards God's promised liberation and flourishing for all creation. Queer people come in Black bodies, undocumented bodies, Israeli bodies, Palestinian bodies, Native bodies. Queer people die from polluted drinking water and are victims of domestic violence. Queer people are also asked to abide by our non-discrimination policies. Queer people are from all ethnicities and speak all languages, so any issue of justice is a queer issue. Therefore, utilizing the gospel of love as a guiding principle is relevant to our work because queer Palestinians exist and have been used as an excuse to justify violence towards the Palestinian people. Therefore, the location of our next General Assembly is relevant not just because the legislative landscape and safety of LGBTQIA+ people are at risk, but also because of environmental impact and safety of undocumented migrants. Therefore, gun violence is relevant to our work because queer people are significantly more impacted by gun violence than other groups. Therefore, whatever is happening with Board of Pensions is relevant to our work, for queer families will be hit harder by the consequences. So today, we, more like Presbyterians, ask you all to consider every matter on the table through an intersectional lens. We recognize that our liberations are bound together. As Fannie Lou Hamer said, we are not free until everybody is free, which is a quote that I learned almost 20 years ago from Presbyterians for Peace Fellowship. So thank you all, and I think that's it.
Thank you so much, Claudia. And thank you to all of our partners and all of our speakers for covering a lot of ground. So appreciative of the research you've done and the research you've shared. At this point, we have about 20 minutes that we have dedicated for questions and answers. If you are in attendance and you have a question for one of our speakers, I would encourage you to share it in one of two ways. Please either put your question in the chat, or please raise your hand on the screen. If you know how to use the little emote, that is the best way to get Zoom to recognize your raised hand. And Rachel and Jan, who are two of my PPF pals, I'm going to recruit your help in helping me spot people who have hand raised, please. And we will jump into Q&A. First up, I see, it looks like MJ Wojtek from Twin Cities.
Yes, hello. My question is for, let me switch back to gallery view so I can remind myself of people's names. Jan or Harter, I believe towards the end of your presentation when you were talking about DOE 2 or 3, you held a blue sheet saying that you had that information on this was available in this resource. Could you provide a link to that resource? Because I do not know where that can be found.
Well, the Peace Fellowship always provides briefing papers for every General Assembly committee that sort of clarifies where we think action is needed, and that's the briefing paper for that committee. They are currently being posted on our website at presbypeacefellowship.org. I'm not sure they're quite up yet, but that's where they are. If you're a member of a committee, we tried to find you and mail one to you, so you probably have a blue sheet. But if you didn't get one, go to presbypeacefellowship.org. And if you still can't get it, please email me, and I'll put my email in the chat, and I will get you the committee paper for any of the 12 committees.
Thank you, Jan. I see Lizzie Healy with your hand raised.
Hi, my name is Lizzie, and I am a YAD on the Financial Resources Committee. I have a question about FIN 12, particularly how I can best advocate for this issue in committee meetings.
Well, I think you need to assess how other commissioners are coming at this. Are there other people who are raising concerns? If you look at those comments from the Advisory Committee on Social Witness Policy, they raise a whole lot of questions like, do we even know for sure that this will raise more money through the special offerings, or will this decrease proceeds? They also say that the study was maybe done at a time during COVID, and it might not have been as thorough a study as was needed, and maybe local people were not consulted as much as they should have been. So there's a number of reasons that are not related to peacemaking that this report looks like it's not quite ready to roll. And so I would look at the Advisory Committee on Social Witness Policy statements at the end and see who else on the committee is also concerned about this. Tell them when you have a chance to talk to your committee, say, I am concerned about the peacemaking aspects of this report. Is anybody else concerned about another aspect of it? And then you all work together You work together. I know it's hard to do when you're from your home, when you're at your computer, but you need to learn to text and email your fellow committee members while your committee is going on. And in the evenings, you need to coordinate. It's not just a one-person thing that can change a report. You need to find some allies on your committee who may have other perspectives. This could be amended to protect the 25% to congregations for the World Communion offering. That's one thing that could be done. The report is inconsistent. Obviously, they try to not tie the special offerings to specific programs anymore, but obviously the Board of Pensions and the committee that works with educational institutions for communities of color, they were able to get to this task force ahead of time, it looks to me like, and protect their percentages and commitments. So some programs are protected because they got there first. They had the fortitude to interact with the task force before the committee was finalized. So it's very inconsistent. That's another issue you can look at. If you want to email me, I'll send you the paper for that committee.
Awesome. Thank you, Lizzie. Thank you, Jan. Bruce Gillette, I see your hand.
Presbyterians for Earth Care welcome our friends to sign up to give testimony at the open hearings of the committees. I think we should try to do that for all of the committees to make sure the progressive voices are heard beyond the overture advocates. That's where we can bring in some expert testimony. We're going to have Bill Brown, an Old Testament professor, do some Bible in the environment. We're going to have a variety of victims from the climate crisis, all kinds of folks. That's the only space we have for that. So make use of that time. The registration deadlines for getting on those testimonial list is coming up pretty quickly here. So I would encourage us to share that. I also think Jan and friends have done a wonderful job. I think of the briefly as the GA Reader's Digest condensed version. And I hope this will soon be on the Peace Fellowship website, because I would love to share this with my friends who I know are commissioners and advisory delegates. This is a great resource, and we should share it with everyone. I know it's helpful to have the more in-depth papers for the committees, but this overview summary is excellent and can be a guide for people to advocate outside of the committee, also on the plenary floor. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm loving this. I'm loving this love between peacemaking organizations too. This is a great energy to have. After Q&A too, I fully echo that need and that value for folks to speak in public hearings, and for folks who are unfamiliar with that language. Public hearings is the space in which people who are not commissioners and not advisory delegates have to speak to overtures they care about. That is going to be occurring while the committees or while the commissioners are in committee. Presbyterian Peace Fellowship has a few more resources to share on that front. We're going to do that shortly. I want to make sure that we have space for Q&A before we pivot into that. I see in the chat, Claudia has a question. Can you add a link to the public hearing so people know where to sign up? Yes, pending. I can definitely and will definitely share a link for how to register. I know some committee schedules have gone out, so if there are specific overtures that you want to speak to, you'll know when to be prepared. The rest of those schedules, I think, should be coming out very shortly, because GA is coming up very shortly. And I see Jeff's question: if this webinar is being recorded, could we send this webinar to some commissioners? I would be comfortable with that. I think if there are people who you think could benefit from it, go ahead. I would also say, because we covered a lot of ground in this space, if you know commissioners who are on committees specific to what you've learned here, I would encourage you, flex your relational capacity, share what you know with them, share why it matters to you. We love having the experts to break down why it matters. And I would argue at GA, knowing other people who you care about issues goes a long, long way. So if there is something that you specifically as an individual have heard and that resonated with you, you have friends and commissioners who you're going to be working with, happy to have them referred to the folks who spoke, but also please don't underestimate your own voice. I think that you being able to tell your friends why this matters to you would be wonderfully helpful. Jay Jackson, I see your hand.
All right, have I unmuted? All right, thank you. So I am on one of the committees, DOE, this year, and this is brand new to me. So I've not done General Assembly before. I take this very seriously, and I've tried to spend as much energy and still run a business as I can to bone up on it. And I wish I had known all of the things we were going to talk about today. I would have studied on all of them. But I did look at the one about children and children's safety yesterday, and I took the day off from work and spent some time on the data. And so I'll leave today's presentation and conversation in some confusion. First of all, let me point out that one thing I learned is that the child death rate today is half what it was when I graduated from high school. And I think that is awesome. And we should all be applauding what's been done in this country to bring down the child death rates. What's important about the rate that we have, that's more like 29 out of 100,000 rather than it used to be 58 out of 100,000, is that the most significant source of children dying is car wrecks. The next one is suicide, and the next one is homicide. Car wrecks are 20%, suicide is 11%, homicide is 9%. Accidental gun injuries is 0.6%. So it's just a tiny fraction. And I feel like the problem there is lack of education. More and more, we don't educate our children about guns and gun use and gun safety, and we don't make them comfortable and knowledgeable. And so they have accidents, and that's not a good thing. So I bring that out because I don't want to get into a lengthy discussion or debate of this particular overture. There are two other things in this overture that concern me. One is the advocacy against households, against it being normal for guns to be in households. We're in the United States, and it is normal for guns to be in households. And I want my children to play with guns so I can teach them gun safety. So I'm concerned about that whole phrase that was in the overture. And I'm also concerned about the whole phrase, and I've seen in everything we've done today, this pattern of going after somebody that manufactures something that some user down the road might have used for something that wasn't good, and we're going after the manufacturer. I feel like we are wasting our time and theirs to do that. And so that concerns me. And then, the main thing about this is I feel like the data that's been quoted has been lumped together to not lead us towards the truth. And so if I don't say anything and nobody else says anything, then we go forward only hearing the presentations we had today. And maybe that's enough for me to just say, I want people to drill down and do their own research and find out what the truth is from the things we're going to be asked to vote on. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jay. I'm with you on digging into that research being important. I would echo your call to do that. One data point I would add that I happen to know from my own work as a chaplain minister, you mentioned suicide and you mentioned homicide as very high rates of deaths for children. Gun violence is a big part of those secondary statistics, just as something else to consider. And I don't want to pull us into a debate. I appreciate you sharing your perspective. And yeah, thank you for handling that. Bruce, I see your hand. Do you have a question about a different topic? You are on mute, my friend.
I've been a hospital chaplain as well as a pastor and experienced the tragedies of gun violence. I want to echo what you just said. suicides is the highest level of gun violent deaths. And if you do it with a gun, you're far more likely to be successful than trying poison, slashing wrist, hanging, and all the others. And if you want factual documentation on that, look at Johns Hopkins, which has done research on it. So there is problems with guns in households, and we need to look at it holistically. And there's nothing wrong with suing gun manufacturers that market these weapons to children in video games and everything else. So we can have another debate off screen here, but welcome to have that dialogue with you sometime.
Thank you all. I am scanning our chat for raised hands. I know there has been some commentary regarding open hearing testimony in the chat. Thank you all for sharing your perspectives there. Do we have any other questions for any of our speakers today? If the answer is no, and it is time for us to start wrapping this up and getting back to our Saturdays, I am fine with that. Before we pivot, a couple of resources I wanted to share with you. We'd been talking about public hearings and the importance of them. I am sharing another link in the chat, and it is on how to register and how open hearings are going to be working. The link itself has much more information than I can summarize here, but the big things to know. Number one, the deadline for signing up for standard overtures and items of business that are not commissioners' resolutions is June 24th. That is about 9 days from now. June 24th is the deadline to register for open hearing for standard overtures and items of business. The deadline gets pushed back to June 26th for commissioners' resolutions. The link from OGA has information on how to register and how to sign up to be heard, essentially. That is one resource that we are sharing. There are two more coming up specifically from the Presbyterian Peace Fellowship. On June 20th, we're going to be hosting 2 strategy sessions for anyone who is interested in signing up in open hearing. A lot of what we'll be focused on for our general session is going to be on the overtures that we heard about today. Let me drop that link for you. So that is, if you would like to join us on June 20th, I believe 8 p.m. Eastern time is when we're meeting to talk about how to sign up for open hearings for some of the overtures we talked about here, and how to also just how to talk about them, what kind of talking points might be resonant. Same night, also June 20th, also 8 p.m. Eastern, we're going to have an overture strategy session specifically focused on the gun violence prevention. That is going to be hosted by the Presbyterian Peace Fellowship's Gun Violence Prevention Working Group. That is for anyone who is really specifically would like to narrow in on that topic and assist with that advocacy. 3 links in the chat, 1 for registering for open hearing, 1 for strategizing on general overtures, and 1 for strategizing specifically on overtures related to gun violence. If you would like to participate in that, you do not have to be a commissioner to do so. This is one of the pieces of GA that is open to anyone and everyone in the Presbyterian world. Thank you again to all of our speakers from the Presbyterian Peace Fellowship, Covenant Network of Presbyterians, Israel-Palestine Mission Network, and Presbyterians for Earth Care, and More Light Presbyterians. Thank you all who joined today. I hope that this was something meaningful and helpful. And we'll leave the window up for a little bit if you all want to go through the chat, grab the emails, grab the links that are going to be most meaningful to you. And I'll see what I can do about getting a recording for this event sent out as well to folks who registered. Thank you so much. Go in peace. Excited to see you at GA 226. Let's do this.
Thank you.
Brian, I miss the donuts too. I miss the donuts and I miss the sanctuary. I was thinking about that as far as how we used to host these meetings together.